I'm here at Magfest with game designer Brian Palladino. Thank you for speaking with me.
Thank you.
I'd like to start by asking about this game that we're looking at here. It's Disco Ships.
Yeah.
So tell me about it.
Okay. So Disco Ships is a 2D top-down local multiplayer shooter. It's based in it's kind of it feels like Asteroids in a way with the way that you play. Basically, it's mainly multiplayer. So you're trying to phrase this right, but basically you're playing against the other players, and you have a certain amount of health, but your health is your ammo. So that's the key. Is like when you fight, you have to manage your damage and just make sure that it's like most local multiplayer shooters have people like to spam the trigger, and they're used to like bullet hell kind of games where you just fire endlessly. But there's like repercussions for that in Disco Ships. You have to manage your damage output because it's your health. So as you play, asteroids fly onto the screen with different health in them, and you break open the asteroids as you play and just try and beat the other player by keeping health and keeping it going. So the reason why it's called Disco Ships is I'm just pulling the theme out for like all the lights and flashy, interesting aesthetic, and the music. The music is an original soundtrack created by my brother and a couple of friends. We had the equipment to do it, so we were like, well, screw it, if I'm going to put together a game, and I might as well include my friends who can do the stuff that I need. So that's how.
It's a cool sounding soundtrack.
Yeah. Thanks.
So you mentioned that you worked on prototypes of this. I was going to ask if this is the game you're most proud of. Are there other games that you've developed that?
So I've done some so like my arc right now is like I went to school for industrial design, and I decided out of school that I could design products, but like I could also design games. I just needed to learn the tools to do so. So I found Unity through talking to a professor, and I started learning Unity for 2 years, and C# programming. And I went to a local community college for a class, and I just started making some little prototypes of games. They're all, I'm trying to think of some prototypes off my head. Like I tried to make a networked multiplayer medieval game, and that ended up being too much scope. I had to bring it down, so I was like, what's something simple that I can do that I could probably see a project through to fruition, and this was the idea. So just a simple 2D top-down local multiplayer shooter. So yeah, right now this is like my main thing. I found a game scene, an indie dev scene in Philadelphia, which is near me. I came from New Jersey, but I moved to Philly after a couple months of going and meeting up with this group. They're called the Philly Game Mechanics, and they've been like doing a lot of stuff for the indie scene in Philly. So I found them, I brought my game, and I just kind of kept developing it over the last couple months, and it's almost been a year now that I've been working on the project. So I found this group, and I've been going and networking with them, and I actually found a job at an indie studio in Philly, and for programming C#, they're called the PHL Collective. And so now I'm just like, I moved to Philly, I got an apartment with some friends, and I've just been living life as a game developer at this point, which is kind of wicked, because a year ago I was sitting in my parents' house learning how to make games, and now I'm doing it for a living, which is really interesting.
That's pretty nice.
So this is just the start, I mean, coming to these events, it's all about meeting people and learning like what other people are doing to get to the positions that you want to be in.
Right.
So I really see it as the start of my career. Right now I'm just trying to launch the game and get it out there, because it's been a year, and I'm already frustrated with my code base, and I can tell that that's going to get even worse as I get better and better at doing this stuff.
Right.
So I think what people usually say when you're learning to become a game developer, I've seen so much stuff, and it's all through the internet, YouTube tutorials, and people talking on Reddit. They always say, just keep making games. Just make a lot of games. The Philly Game Mechanics have a game jam every other month, and which is like a game jam is like a week-long thing where you get with a group of people and you just make a game, just quick as you can, and try and get down a solid mechanic, and then everybody brings them together and they talk about them and they play them. So that's really what I'm trying to do here. Is just like I've made a couple game jam games, but Disco Ships is something that I'm trying to like complete the entire process, because you're not going to learn that whole process of launching a game if you don't do it.
Right.
So it's just, and I'm going to stumble through it as the first time and learn. But that's what I'm here for, you know.
Right.
So I don't know if I answered your question, but
you did.
Trying to say the stuff that's on my head, you know.
Well, one thing that I noted that I had a question about, maybe you could answer. I don't see any of the big game companies here.
Right.
You know, is that on purpose or?
So this is the Magfest indie video game showcase right here.
Right. But even out.
No, you're right. In this whole thing, I think that they try to keep it local and indie because, well, not necessarily local, because I think there's people from California here, but they're really trying to bring up the community, because right now indie games are really taking off, honestly. Like the market is, people are respecting games that are smaller and have more focused teams that care about the game a little bit more than just the end goal, which is making money.
Right.
But it's really interesting to see so much support for that. So there's actually a lot of Philly games here as well. Like Soul is from Philly. These guys right here, Quadratron, it's Super Rock Blasters.
Yeah.
It's fun to walk around and be like, oh, like I've seen you at Game Mechanics before. Like, I know you.
Yeah.
You know, it's so interesting, and like the indie community is relatively tight.
Yeah.
Like people know each other, and it's a whole new thing.
Yeah.
That AAA is not a part of, because they're massive studios of a lot of people.
Right.
But see, the AAA is like, people come out of AAA to jump back into indie because they know that they can work on a more focused game and get a clearer vision out of it, and create something that they really want. Where if you put a big team on something, there's got to be a lot of really good management to get the project, one person's vision,
right,
spread over 40, 50 people.
Yeah.
You're going to have push and pull of creativity. People are going to do different things that don't fit with the vision.
Right.
So having a smaller team is the ideal spot. When I started out, I talked to Bill Gardner, who worked on BioShock. I just messaged him on Twitter because he asked people to talk to him, and he left I don't remember exactly what studio he was in for BioShock, but he left and started his own studio, and Deep End Games is what it's called, and he just released a game on the Switch. I mean, it's on a lot of platforms, but he also released it on the Switch as an indie developer. And it's interesting to see the AAA. You want to go to AAA to learn the process, and then you come out and you go indie because the process can be shrunken down and done by just you.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And I think a lot of it stems from technology and being accessible. You go on the internet. That's how I learned.
Yeah.
I went on YouTube, I went on Reddit, I browsed forums about how to program and learn game engines, and I mean, I'm making a game, and that's that. Yeah. And I'm making money doing it at a job.
Cool.
So it's wicked. I don't know if I talked in a circle there, but
no, your answer
this is indie's really, really interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So how do you know when a game is finished? I guess you're still prototyping.
Okay, so this is where industrial design comes in, and we used to just work on in industrial design. You work on a product, whether it's the next water bottle or a hair dryer, but you can always iterate on what you're doing, and you basically get it to a point. You're never going to be satisfied with where it is. In a game perspective, you get it to the point where it's stable and it's not buggy and you work on the core of the game, and you make sure that fits within your scope of how long you want to work on the project. There's people here who have been working on their games for 2.5 years, and maybe that's their vision. They want to work for 3.5 years on a game and get it to the point where it's, I don't know. It's all up to you when you want to finish your game, but people can get caught up in it, and that's what I'm trying not to do, because you build a game, you learn a lot. You build the next game, that's going to be built so much better, and it's going to happen faster, and you just got to keep learning. Right. I think that's, at least for me, that's how I'm taking it, and that's how a lot of people recommend you do it, is build games, keep iterating. That's why game jams exist, because it's a way to quickly go through the process of building a game and learn from it. And if you want to pursue the game afterward, you have a good prototype to start from.
I've heard that for a lot of creative endeavors, where just keep producing. Don't dwell on one project for too long, so that you keep learning.
It's good to have the core of like how to dwell on a project, because you can do a lot. But it's definitely more important to just keep making, because there's so many factors that go into it that you'll only see when you end it and zoom out and say, wow, like, you got to know how to set up a booth at a conference. You're going to do it wrong the first time. I got a big piece of cardboard attached to a TV to get my sign in the air, but I didn't know that there would be, banners online to display it better. So there's like, it's all, you learn every time. This is like our second expo kind of thing. So we learned from the first one, but you just got to keep learning, and it's a matter of just repetition.
Right. All right. So, what inspires you?
What inspires me? Well, I've always been a gamer for a long time. I mean, as far as I can remember, I've always had a console. What inspires me? I really like making things that people enjoy. I think that's like the peak of satisfaction for me, is when I create something and people smile and play it, and they're having a good time. That's like my ideal situation. I mean, whether it's a product that is like something somebody uses every day from industrial design, like a broom, if they have a good time using that broom and it does its job right, then that's the best. And I can see that in the game sense as well. If a game is good and people enjoy the mechanics, and they're having a good time, then I'm doing it right, and that satisfies me. And I like having something to do. I've always had like a slight engineering mind, and that's why I picked up programming pretty quickly. And that also tickles my fancy, just meddling in my code to make the game work better. And a lot of people have no idea what you're doing. It used to be wizardry to me, but I learned it, and that's so interesting too. Just being able to learn stuff and keep learning more about it every day. I go to my job and I learn a new thing from the guy above me who knows way more about programming than I do. And it's and that's satisfying as well. So like, I go to my job every day with a smile on my face, and just waiting for the next thing to learn. That I'm just gonna be like, I gotta rebuild disco ships again. So
what about creativity? Your creative inspirations?
So I don't know if I can trace it back, but I mean, I love Nintendo. I think that they do awesome work. There's a guy on YouTube, Mark Brown, who puts up some videos on good game design, and I've been watching them since I started getting into it, and he really pulls out key things about how Nintendo goes about creating a game, and how they focus on the fun and making sure the mechanics are fun before they even step in and make the aesthetic. Like for example, Splatoon, which is a game where you run around and paint the ground to like, you have to paint more ground than the other players. they started with boxes and squares, and you were a box. And then they decided that the punk aesthetic came out of the idea of painting walls. So everybody's like spray painted. They're all like squid people who like shoot ink out of guns, and it's like, and they build this really awesome thing once they have the core mechanics down. So I know I'm starting to get really technical, and I think as I've gotten more programming based, I've definitely jumped into a more technical thought process. But I've been an artist my whole life too. I created all the art for disco ships, minus the logo and the original ship design that one of my graphic design buddies helped me out with. But I think I find more interest in the technical side of things, and then art is like my secondary enjoyment. As inspiration, it's just, I don't know, I love seeing other people doing stuff too. It's so, because then you're still caught up in the magic. You're not even thinking about it. If they can pull you in without thinking about how it's put together, that's like, they're doing a good job. And then I'm like, how do you do that? How did you build this thing? And man, I love seeing other indies do stuff, because when you build a game, you can build a game in so many different ways that everybody has a different experience doing it. The way Disco Ships is built is entirely different than how Soul is built. You know, it even goes down to just like how they load in their images, or how they're loading the world around them. And it blows my mind with all the possibilities. So you have to kind of like remember that everybody does everything differently, and take what you can.
What is your most important designing or development tool? Is there something special you need in your workspace?
I couldn't do it without Unity, which is a free game engine online. They have so many tutorials and stuff. You can learn anything about Unity online, and everybody works together on it. The dev community in Philly is really big on Unity. So that's probably my main tool, you know, other than a computer, which is like the main thing. But I love music as well, and I think, I don't know, I'm always listening to music when I'm working, I guess.
Okay. What kind of music?
All kinds of music.
Just a mix.
I think you can learn to appreciate most music if you sit down and give it a chance. I'm not too keen on EDM and stuff like that, hardcore electronic music, but I've been around the block with a bunch of different stuff. I used to go to Warped Tour and see that kind of stuff, and I listened to even down to like Creed or something. I don't know, my mom used to listen to that. Nickelback's tight.
Okay, alright.
But that's definitely not my main music preference. If I was going to sit down and play some music, I'd probably play Bon Iver. He's got some really good stuff. But, you know, I like music. I also play music. I'm a musician. I sing and play guitar. I play drums. That's why it was easy to pull my brother in, because he's a musician as well. He's trying to go for it, full time. And we have a lot of friends who are musicians. So we've had recording equipment and stuff for a long time, because we've been doing it since we were 12. And I used to play shows in bands and stuff. So. I do a lot of stuff. And games is just something that I was interested in for a while, and the idea of making one was such a mystery, and it's so weird to think that now I understand it. I guess that's life, though, you know. You don't know until you know, and then...
And it's brought together a lot of different things you like.
So, like, there's... it's... I thought industrial design was that, but creating games happens to take precedence, I think. With all the inputs that go into it, I love all the angles of the process. Even though I can't have a hand in every one, I tried it. it doesn't work. It takes years to work on something just by yourself. So I decided to double down on my programming and try and get some other people to help me on everything else.
You sort of answered this already. Maybe is there an element of game design or development you enjoy working on the most, and why?
Definitely the core mechanics, because that's the bread and butter of the game. If you're not having a good time playing the core of the game, then you're probably not going to stick to it. You're probably not going to enjoy it. And that's like narrowing down how the player moves around the field, what it feels like to fire like a weapon, if there's a weapon. Like in Disco Ships, all of the weapons have different ways of playing, so you can cater to a bunch of different play styles. The core mechanics, to me, are whatever the player is constantly doing in the game. There's a game loop. Creating that game loop is so interesting because you're creating an experience out of hitting a bunch of buttons or using the inputs and just making some stuff happen on the screen. If I had to pick a second one, it's adding juice into the game, adding particle effects and screen shake, and making the game really engaging on like a visual level. It's amazing what can happen when you add a splash. When somebody shoots a weapon, like a splash of smoke that comes out of the weapon, or like when it hits something, a splash that like represents the direction that the weapon was fired in or something. It's all visual feedback that gets the player more into the game.
How did your first game success, however you might define it, change the way you design or develop games?
I don't know if I'm there yet. I don't know if I can say that.
Or a personal success that you achieved.
That I've created a game. I think I used to look at it, because coming from industrial design, a lot of it is on pen and paper. I had an issue of designing on paper in school, where I would create something and then I would spend a fraction of the time actually building the thing and getting it out. I feel like I always had that issue, but games have really hammered into me that I need to build something. And it doesn't matter exactly what it looks like, but having that down is important. Getting that core mechanic out and really ironing out what the game is on a base level. That's definitely because I spent a while on Disco Ships trying to figure out what direction the game was going to go in, but I had my prototype done immediately, and I could tell that I was able to do something with it. And I say that because Disco Ships was like after a couple prototypes of working on stuff. I spent a lot of time drawing some elaborate game design documentation for a game that I was never going to be able to make. I had an idea for a mech shooter where you pick a bunch from a different cast of characters of mechs, and it would be online multiplayer and all this stuff. And I started digging into it, and I was like, my scope is too big. You gotta pull your scope down, and as you work on it, find out where you can expand your scope without causing too many setbacks or making the work too much. And it's all on a timeline. So I think managing my time and getting down to core mechanics of stuff that I've picked up over the time of developing my first real game, and also working at a studio now, understanding how they have a process and a pipeline of getting a game done in time, and making sure that it's all the right pieces are in order before they expand it to, instead of 5 levels to 50 levels, or adding variety to the game.
What role do games or the game designer have in society?
Game design is, I think game designers don't necessarily have to be the person programming. It doesn't have to be the person making the models, but you got to be able to do something more than just designing a game, because you can design a game, but if it doesn't come together, it doesn't come together. Okay, game designers' role in society. provide enjoyment for people. And since, for me, that enjoyment provides me with enjoyment, it's kind of like a circle of enjoyment. I don't know how to better phrase enjoyment, but I think it's like when people go to a carnival and have a good time throwing balls into a hoop or some rings on bottles. If they can do that anywhere, I mean, people have so much leisure time these days. It's nice to get, I don't know, it's really interesting that, I mean, and you can go into that, the whole dynamic of people having more free time, so they're willing to spend it doing random things like saving a princess from a castle, and so it's just like, I don't totally understand it, but I'm a gamer myself, and I love it, the feeling of, there's so many feelings and emotions you can evoke from gaming that I think it really fits for everybody, and every game is different. You know, whether you're role-playing some warrior out in Skyrim, or you're playing a narrative game where you're deciding how these people are going to, you know, experience some situation, and you're like playing God, you know, telling them what to say. Some people love that stuff, and I think it's all just about personal enjoyment in the time that we have, and game designers are just there to provide those experiences in the same way that an industrial designer would provide a product for somebody to use in a meaningful way. It's just like a more laid back and leisure kind of way of doing that.
Would you say there's a difference between games where you escape into a world versus games where you complete tasks and achieve, like, you know, you hit the numbers? And
definitely. I mean, I played Stardew Valley, and holy crap, after playing that game, which it sucks you in because you have a certain amount of time during the day, I think it's like 7 minutes, and you have to complete all these tasks. If you don't, your crops will dry up and you'll lose money. You have to talk to the townspeople to get them to do things. You're trying to romance some person in the town to progress the story, and that kind of, you stumble your first couple days, and if you don't get in bed in time, you show up and you lose a bunch of money because someone had to bring you back. It's like 2 a.m. You have to be back in bed or something. And after doing that for a while, you get really into this schedule, and then I realized when I stopped playing, I was like, all right, what am I going to do next? It's like, whoa, we're not playing Stardew anymore. This is life. We're just going on, and I think that's such an interesting mindset to be able to schedule out your day, and it's definitely helped me in being able to achieve a goal that there's no pressure on me to finish my game or like get something done. I have to set my own goals and complete my tasks in my own self-driven way, and I think that carries over into life for sure. I don't know if every game has that element built into it, and they all vary to different degrees, but Stardew definitely got me interested in that idea, and people are definitely doing games for educational purposes and things to get people to learn other things than just being able to click some buttons or time management.
What movies, books, games, or other creative media in science fiction or fantasy have inspired you?
I was always a Star Wars fan. Maybe not to the extent of some other people, but I watched, it's actually funny, I think I watched the prequels before the originals. And so I ended up having this whole other idea of how Star Wars is supposed to be. And everybody else likes the prequels more, or the originals more. But I loved the visual effects and stuff that were going on in the prequels, like all the lightsaber fights and the space battles. Also awesome. I've actually pulled a bunch of elements from that into Disco Ships to kind of, you know, as inspiration for like different abilities. Like there's one called Drop Junk, where you literally just drop some cargo. I think I made a keyboard sprite that comes out sometimes, and an afro. just to kind of fit the disco ship's aesthetic. But in Star Wars, there's a point where Obi-Wan's being chased by Jango Fett through space, and Jango Fett's missiles are chasing him, and Obi-Wan releases his cargo, and the missiles get blown up on the cargo, and Obi-Wan gets away. I was like, that would be an interesting ability. If someone's chasing you, you drop some junk behind you. It's like, release the cargo. I don't know. I guess as far as other science fiction, I'm not... I don't know for sure. This is a really hard thing to pull up all of a sudden. I'm trying to think of some other games, if it's games or movies. Man,
nothing underground or, not well known among.
Okay, yeah, I said Star Wars.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
That. Hey. I guess if I had to throw something out there, Evolve is a game that came out maybe a year or two ago, and it was you were hunting a monster, and you're a team of 4, and you work together in different ways to track down the monster, and then so somebody has the role of tracking it, somebody has the role of actually trapping the monster in a dome, and then somebody has a role of like doing the most damage when you're in the dome, and somebody has a role of healing the team. So it's like, I guess that's very sci-fi because it's really futuristic of going on a distant alien planet, and the way they created the world, the way they pulled together team dynamics to make it a success of like, to make it feel successful, whether you were the monster or whether you were the team of 4, really, really awesome feelings when you were able to best a team of 4 as this giant monster with these abilities to take them down in a strategic way, or sneak up on them. And then you had the world where you were walking through as a player trying to track down the monster, and he tracks you through some swamp, and you get caught up in a plant that's like eating you alive, and your buddies need to shoot the plant to get you out of it, or a giant monster crocodile comes out that isn't the monster that you're hunting. It's just another one on the map that's like causing you issues that you have to deal with. Totally awesome, and really sparked my interest in game development in general, because the devs would stream on Twitch their gameplay before the game came out, and I was like, what are these people doing to like make this thing? I started to get really interested in it, and they had blogs online about all their development process, and that got me started in game development actually. Just the interest in that game. As far as other science fiction, I can't really put my finger on it, but I'm sure there's so many other things.
Well, you said you really like the Star Wars visuals. Any other movies with strong visuals that hit you hard?
So I've never really been a person. I never really watched TV as a kid. I was always playing games. That was like my thing. So as far as like movies to come out that interested me, I really have to be hard pressed to go see a movie. If it's like, I haven't even seen the new Star Wars. I saw the newest one, but I haven't gone and seen the newest one yet. I don't know. I guess I just like playing games more. There's something about interactive content that really piques my interest. I think the Alien series is interesting. I think that's the last science fiction movie I watched. I think it was, I don't remember what the Prometheus, and then there was the next one I watched. I mean, all awesome stuff. You have no idea what they're going to stumble into, and it's all just, the thing with science fiction is you don't know what's going to happen because it's science fiction. There are tropes, but like there's always stuff you never know what can happen because there's no base in exact reality. I was always a fan of Lord of the Rings. That's not science fiction.
Well, it's fantasy.
But yeah, did you say fantasy?
I did.
Oh, okay. So Lord of the Rings is definitely my shit.
Yeah.
But definitely enjoyed that just as much as Star Wars, if not more. Other fantasy things, but that's the thing. I don't lean too far into it either. I don't know if I keep up with all the crazy stuff going on. I just kind of see my thing here and there, and I play games. I've dropped so many hours on Skyrim and Fall Out, all those kinds of games. They suck me in. Man, I'm trying to think of more stuff. But
that's fine. My next question is there a big game idea that you have for the future? What is it? Something that just seems like, wow, if only.
I mean, I started in local multiplayer, which is what Disco Ships is. Yeah. I would love to learn online multiplayer. I think that's a really interesting direction, especially in indie. I want to be able to do that. So I think I also love class-based games like Overwatch, where you pick a character and you learn that character, and you really dive into how they function on the field differently than other characters. And when a game can pull out some roles, the Overwatch has the tank that takes most of the hits. They're usually a larger scale character, so the other people can stand behind them and do what they're supposed to do, whether it's DPS or healing. I really want to dive into that category of gaming because Disco Ships is really lightweight. There's an element to it where you have to learn the different weapons and be able to manage your health, but I think that I want to dive into online multiplayer next. I think it's so if I had a game idea, it would definitely be that mini mechs game where you play as a bunch of different mechs on blocked levels, and the idea, I guess the main thing is that there's two different classes of mechs. There's the tiny ones that can fit through small cracks in the map, and the large ones that are more tanky or have different functions like climbing up walls and flying around. I love. Okay, so here, as I talk about it, the more I think about what I was actually thinking about for the game. I love the idea of taking the inputs that the players do and changing it up for every character. So you're not using, the right trigger to shoot for every single character. But what if the character had a melee attack and you had to press the X and Y button to run, or just different. So every player has to really learn the character to be proficient with them, and you get so much satisfaction out of really honing in on a specific play style, and people respect you for that play style. That's where I kind of want to go with that. I feel like if I was looking to produce a form of art next, rather than something that might sell the best, it'd probably be messing with alternate controls. A game that I really loved that did that, not necessarily on a class-based, but just alternate controls in general. Grow Home and Grow Up are games by an indie studio that got picked up by Ubisoft, where you climb around on rocks by moving the left and right sticks, and then the right and left triggers grab on. So you have to push the left stick up as your right hand is grabbed, and grab the next spot, and that's how you maneuvered around the world. You had to climb up these giant stalks and fly around, and so there you had a little jetpack juice. But yeah, you mainly climb everywhere, and that alternate control scheme sucked me in so fast. It was so interesting to just play the game, and that comes back around to core mechanics. The core mechanics are good. People collect all this shit in the game and have a good time. Alternate controls I'm really interested in. Not necessarily alternate controllers, like how Guitar Hero has a guitar that's custom built, but just trying out different control schemes. Like the controller, the twin stick controller is built for first person shooters, for sure. I mean, you have triggers, you have sticks to be able to move around, but I'd like to see what other things you can do with that control scheme. I think that's where I'd go with it.
All right. Well, that's all I have. Any final thoughts or comments?
Man, I don't know. I think it's a little wild that I was, 2 years ago, I was like, man, I wonder what it's like to build a game. And now I'm at Magfest showing off a game that I created. I've met all these people. I work a job where I make games, and 2 years ago I would have had no idea that I'd get into this position. So it's kind of just, if you want to do something, you just got to do it. That's if I had any advice, that's what I would say. You want to do something, go do it, learn about it. There's so many resources these days to go and find out about things.
Yeah.
So, and I wish I got into it earlier, because if I started even a year before that, I would be in a totally different position at this point. But hindsight is 2020, and but I wouldn't ask for anything else. It's amazing that I got this far.
So, and you can find the game. Where do you find the game?
So, Disco Ships is launching on itch.io this weekend, which is like an indie platform online where you can buy games, download games. You don't need to go through a review process for it, so it's easy to just toss something on there. People usually do it after a game jam. They're like, we put up all the games on itch for free or whatever, just to see if people will play them. And then we're working on getting it on Steam. I'm going to try and do an early access because I feel like it's still in beta. And if there's any interest past that in the game, we'll be pushing out a full release. And I have plenty of design documentation of ideas of how to expand the game, but scope. And then I'll be sending out build and press kits for Xbox and PS4 to try and get on there. But if anybody's interested, it's at Disco Ships on Twitter is where we usually run all of our stuff out of, just to keep it all in one place. We're technically called WhiteBoard Game Studios. That's what I've named the conglomeration, because I do get help from some other people sometimes. Like I'm working with a sound designer in Philly to start getting sounds into the game. That's also why it's in beta, because there's no sound effects yet. It's just a soundtrack. But that'll be in there within the next month or two. So working to get it on Steam. Right now it'll be on itch, and from there we'll see what happens.
Thank you for speaking with me.
Yeah, no problem.
Please visit chrisalvarez.com for more cool stuff. You can also find my website and social media information in the podcast show notes. Thanks for listening, and keep imagining the future.